how to get this pony in the water and start so I'll start sharing the slides. If you both want to start by introducing yourselves, we will get going. Before I share the slides, sorry, housekeeping. Um, Go ahead and ask your comments in the chat and Q&A. I will try to get to them. I'll be doing a lot of different things at once. So we will get to them at the end, if nothing else. And please take the survey on your way out. This will be recorded and made available about 2 weeks after today. So please feel free to introduce yourselves.
Okay, I can step in first. My name is Dom Freschi. Go by Dom. Dominic does not matter. I'm a customer success director at Openprise. Background of experience in bit of neuropsychology. Went into kind of operational data work, both on the marketing and RevOps side. Now helping customers build out what they can with Openprise.
And I'm Courtney Sylvester. I am the director of RevOps at Openprise. And so Openprise is also a RevOps company. So we get some pretty wild asks, I'd say, from a company where your leaders know that you can kind of do anything. So we have fun, but we're able to build a lot at our organization. And so Dom's helping customers do that. I help. I guess I help. Our teams do it. I don't know about the help sometimes, but
Well, you can't be everywhere all at once. Another sci-fi reference. I'm Camela Thompson. I'm head of marketing at the RevOps Co-op, but before that, I spent 15 years in operations spanning sales, marketing, and customer success. I've managed databases, I've managed CRMs, marketing automation platforms, customer success platforms. Basically, if you need it fixed, just point me at it. And I'm so stubborn, I just don't give up. So we nailed the intros. We're going to talk through where we're seeing people struggle with AI and maybe what people jump into before they lay a foundation. We're going to talk about what's working in the market. Courtney's going to share some amazing workflows that she has done with her team that I'm very excited about. And then we're going to do some Q&A. So I may have added this slide because I'm seeing this a lot. I saw it in RevOps AF Berlin, and I felt it a lot in RevOps AF New Orleans. We had a ton of people pitching AI topics. We had a ton of people running to the sessions. We were very lucky in that a few of them were extremely in-depth and detailed, but a lot of them are high-level theory, and the FOMO is real. Everybody feels like they need to try it, master it, play with it, do all the things. Or we're stuck in this world of overwhelm because there's just so much of it and so many ways you can combine different tools or try different things. Plus, we're being pressured by our executive team to try wild things like cold outbound with AI. Tom and Courtney, are you seeing the same thing? Are you feeling this in the market?
yeah, and we talked a little bit about this at RevOps AF, and I talked to a lot of people after that presentation about how sometimes it's just not knowing where to jump in. Maybe it didn't work. A lot of times, like if you're using like a GPT wrapper or something like that, it's not as easy as you thought it was going to be. It looks very easy on LinkedIn. Everybody wants to make everything seem super simple. But what this usually ends up being is yet another tool for ops to manage. And that's if you have ops. If you don't have ops to manage this, I honestly don't know what people are doing who kind of just are figuring everything out themselves. But you need someone who ends up being pretty technical most of the time, because it's not just, let me press play on this and then everything's going to be perfect. That's not how this is working. You have to iterate, pay attention to what's the outputs are, the inputs, and you really need to know your data and pay attention to basically everything if you're going to run something like this and be really careful with it.
Yeah, honestly, we led with a joke for our presentation originally, is that since we started our presentation, there are 16 new AI tools out, published, ready. They're going to make your revenue charts skyrocket to the right? It's honestly going to be this revolutionary, transformative product. And it can be, but I do, in agreement with both of you here, is that it's going to take more work, I think, than people are anticipating. Companies want to say they are using AI because they want to have that boost. They want to have that kind of news notoriety a little bit. But truthfully, how operational teams are going to be able to leverage it takes a lot of planning, a lot of work. And it's still a lot of hands-on time. Now, You can get wonderful transformative things out for your outputs. But in truth, what we're seeing for customers is they have to kind of figure out what it's being used for, not just that they're using it.
And you don't need it for
Mhm.
everything.
No,
You
you
don't
don't,
need it,
right?
you
It's, do you
don't need
need
it for
machine
everything we're
learning? Do
doing.
you need automation, or do you actually need AI?
Yeah, I think one of the things we were talking about before this is the most important things to understanding your customer and understanding the business is not scalable, and that's getting context from everything around you to make sure that you are doing things with an intention and purpose. Rushing into implementing something like cold outbound when you haven't figured out your target audience, your messaging, like all of these really foundational things, you're just scaling really bad practices. And
Yeah.
um, I think AI is also a really great way to scale errors and mistakes. So it is important to start with small populations and
Mhm.
approach things with purpose. So, um, I think this feeds really, really well into the next point is that instead of tackling something that we haven't figured out or even started to approach figuring out, what are the things we see that are approachable? What are things that we know AI is good at? And Dom, you had such a great point about how AI isn't really designed to be accurate and go and gather all the facts and summarize them in a really factual way. It's meant to sound human first. How do you see that playing out in some of the maybe false starts you've seen? Courtney, feel
Yeah.
free to jump in too.
No, yeah, I've seen it with a couple of customers because we do have, we are working with some customers on how they want to implement. At Openprice, we do have like an internal large language model that's, on our own servers and stuff. So it's not one that's going to be reaching out to the internet for things. But what
Mhm.
we've even seen within that is that kind of bias a little bit towards making sure that they deliver a result versus the accuracy of that result. So some of the initial pieces we saw, what were hey, we want to use very low key kind of replace some of the management. What we're seeing a lot of it is a way to kind of automate or update how they're managing some reference data sets. So, for instance, taking job titles and throwing out a job level, job role, doing some of those segmentation pieces. We do see a lot of possibility there, but we did see early on a lot of hallucinations, both in the sense of it was making a decision on a, say, job level, and then changing what it determined was the input job title to make its decision make sense because it was uncertain. And so, just like if a human is uncertain in a situation, they may get flustered, say something, they may lie, they may even make things up to make it seem like they're doing things correctly. And so, we did see some of those results early on. We've worked on our prompt engineering to help improve and kind of get rid of those. But it's something that's always, I think, going to be kind of inherent in the system because it's not A plus B equals C. It truthfully is I think it's A, I think it's B, maybe C. Like I think it's more of an inference than an actual equation that AI is going to be generating.
I think Matt had one of the most extreme examples I've heard of where he uses ChatGPT extensively and Clay for social media. And he was talking to ChatGPT and trying to get it to generate an image. And it's like, I can't do that. And he's like, he had to tell it, yes, you can. I've seen you do it. And then it's like, oh yeah, you're right. And then it would start kind of going again. Courtney, how have you seen this manifest?
I think that what I come back to when I see like this the most is what is it like the blank slate problem? Like I see people walk up and they're like, okay, we have AI now. Like, what am I going to do with it? Like, what a terrible question to ask. You have 10 trillion problems. I know you do. Why are you creating new ones to create more problems with? So, being realistic about what your problems are in the
Mhm.
organization, I think is going to be a really, really, really huge thing. And I know you have that on the slide here. But I really can't say that enough. And that's what I see the most with people, or they just, okay, I'm going to tell you guys something. So I did not think I understood what agents were for a very long time. And I've been like building stuff out with like the APIs and like doing all this stuff for like a long, like, since kind of a lot of this came out. I'm like,
Mhm.
what are people like? Is everybody understanding something that I don't? Okay, they're just a series of prompts. So I see these people just starting and making these massive agents that are just a series of prompts that are pulling from different pieces of information. And often, to your point, Kamala, you're seeing the and the errors are going to be like compounded and expounded as you keep going. Um,
Mhm.
and everyone's like, okay, I solved it. Look, I have this agent and it does everything perfectly. And it's like, you cannot do it that way. And I think that's one of you're not helping your organization when you just build something and then walk away from it. You need to make sure that everything you're doing has checks, has balances as you keep going, that you're paying attention to it. And that doesn't mean, like, for me, I set up actually like flows to check the flows and things like that so that nothing crazy is really happening. But when I think about helping an organization, that's like the easiest way to hurt your organization, is just to dive in way too quickly without really testing more than like one record where it worked really well that one time.
Yeah,
And
and
there are some things, sorry, go ahead.
no, truthfully, just to piggyback on what Courtney said, I think for kind of what's on the slide a bit, it's starting, like I said, you start with a blank slate, and humans throughout time have always kind of struggled. You have a blank piece of paper, blank screen. Where do you start? Where do you begin? Versus, as you mentioned, start in very small, tiny use cases, which is kind of what we're not tiny, but problematic things that you need some extra compute power. You need some extra creativity to help solve today. Start small, check the input, check the output, make sure things are working. And as Courtney said, we've been talking about what some of the AI tools have been able to do for a couple of years now, but it's really until you start in that small and kind of build your skill with it, as well as learn what to expect, the nuances a little bit, you can build to these grander things, because then you do give yourself time to learn, and you do give the company time to kind of understand, okay, here are the controls, here are the things for governance, here's kind of what the general projects that are going to be. You give yourself kind of those building blocks over time.
Oh, roadblocks we're seeing. I'm going to let you both tackle these. We've seen them all.
Yeah, and when we covered this in New Orleans, this really was not only just the roadblocks you're going to encounter, but also the things that kind of may push you, right? So we start with executive directives, and this really is the company made a splash, has a massive contract with OpenAI, Anthropic, any of these large teams to say, okay, we're going to start using AI in a lot of our tools. So then they hand it down to operational teams and say, cool, use this. You're going to hit that roadblock immediately of, cool, how do I use this? Or the inverse, where we actually got a great question. I know we kind of cover this later, but we got a great question after, which was, we have team members that want to use it, but our team is saying we can't, right? Executives are saying, okay, or IT teams saying they can't. We've seen conversations around the capability interest misalignment for this was scoped out for these solutions, and it doesn't address that, or it's not something that, there's going to take a lot of work to get it to address those. How it was, how we're onboarding, how we're implementing it may be problematic. And then also who's in charge of it internally. And these are all pieces, part of those conversations that you need to go through before you even think about starting with one of these tools. Because as you said, Courtney said it again, Camela, you said it as well, you're going to have these errors that are going to, compound over time. So unless you have a lot of these kind of controls and pieces in place, you're going to run into these roadblocks no matter what. So having an answer for them upfront helps you to be able to scale to what you need to do.
I don't want to take us too off the rails, but I had this interesting comment the other day. Someone was saying they'd been through a major event in SaaS's past, and then we all went through this phase of evaluating our tech stack and trying to make it as lean as possible instead of having a bunch of point solutions. And this person was extremely hesitant and kind of judgmental of people who use a lot of point solutions right now. And while there are some purpose built tools, I kind of feel like we're in this point in time where this hasn't been figured out by any means, and we're still learning which use cases, which tools work best when, where it might make sense to experiment a little bit. What are your feelings on that?
I think that what we see now is going to be completely different than we're going to see in 6 months. So learn
Yeah.
all you can, but learn the underlying tech as much as you can. Don't hitch your wagon to one company who has one way of doing things. I think understanding on a higher level is going to make a lot of sense for people. I saw a comment from somebody today, I don't remember, on like LinkedIn, just that like RevOps is getting more technical again. We kind of moved away from it for a few years, and there was like a lot of talk about like compensation and stuff. But I think RevOps is about to get, and marketing ops and sales ops, I don't know where everybody's at, but like CS ops, all of you guys, like we're about to get a lot more technical again. And I think that's how we kind of keep our jobs on some level, but also, yeah, I think things are going to look really, really different, and we have no idea how this is going to end up looking. If you're, I do sort of assume that a lot of like the bigger companies are eventually going to buy out some of these companies who are doing these small ones, or they'll sort of just disappear as they build more of this into their big point solutions, stay stuck in their product for all of eternity because that's what they want. But yeah, that's, I mean, I think that we have no idea what's going to happen, and nobody should, I wouldn't make any bets on anything really, especially system wise.
So Andre says, one of my mandates is to re-engineer the go-to-market tech stack and AI as much as possible, either to string it together or replace. And that speaks to both your point that our roles are getting more technical again, but also this kind of disconnect between wanting to make things as lean as possible. And the rule of thumb with AI, unlike everything else, is try, try, try instead of try, pivot, try, pivot.
Mhm.
So it's really hard to abandon things and not retest them in a while when you see them start to work in certain use cases. Um, so I'm going to keep us moving just so we can get to the really meaty stuff. Let's talk through these points, and then I'll get to Nicholas's question.
Yeah, I mean, as we've gone through, okay, we've talked about the problems that a lot of people have been encountering, that Courtney herself has encountered when building things internally. I've had conversations with customers about kind of how they're having to approach this. It really is, I think the top level one is something that we've kind of preached from the get-go, which is you really have to understand what are the right use cases for your RevOps team, for your tech stack, for the problems that you face. You have to understand what the problem actually is. So for instance, if you're trying to understand why, I know one of the things Courtney has been looking at and she can speak to as well, which is why are we losing opportunities at certain stages, or why aren't opportunities moving to a certain stage? There's a lot of data and a lot of things and a lot of ones and zeros we can look at. That could be something where we could use something, some kind of contextual intelligence to understand the data itself, look for patterns, and help uncover things. But that's like taking one problem that we all have faced at one point or another and be able to point something specifically at it and say, I have this problem, help me understand what's going on here, versus tell me all about my sales cycle. Because that's not going to get you the same kind of contextual intrinsic information that you're going to be able to use.
Yeah, I mean, to your point there, that is a problem that everybody has, and I don't think we're actually addressing it later, but I'm literally just taking each date for each stage that we have and pulling every gong call, every email, every single thing that we have within that date range to look at these piecemeal to try to understand what's going on up prior to that, that we're not just looking at somebody's close loss notes. And that's just using this as a summary, but it's also a summary that's sort of in like a silo a little bit. I'm not asking it to expand on other things it guessed about, because summarization is going to be guessing, and things like this can be really, really helpful. You can build them out and edit them, but really, like these are things that I don't want to go read all the emails and listen to every gong call and all of that stuff for every single deal at a certain stage. That would be, I'd quit. I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. I'm AI doesn't get burnout. Like I would get burnout from something like that. So when you're thinking about your strategy, think about things that can be replaced, like tasks that would burn you out, things that, a problem you've always had that you're like, I don't really know what to do with this. Try to start with things like that. And, think about we have data quality in here, which I mean is super boring, but like if you can use AI to help you improve some of your data inputs, but your inputs, like if you want a certain output, you have to make sure what's going in is at least correct. And then you still have to monitor like any hallucination or like anything else that happens. But you got to start with like something decent to begin with, or crap in, crap out, like we all know.
The only thing
Yeah,
I would
and
add is like never lose sight of the end user. And I've had so many managers come to me and say, it would be so cool and helpful for my team if the system could do XYZ. And then I go talk to their team and they're like, no, I really just need to be able to sort through these leads faster to figure out what I should be going after. So make sure you're getting the business context and that you're talking to end users. Like, don't create something because it sounds like a really good idea. Bounce it off people first before you put the work into it. Oh, I'm
Make sure
sorry,
it's
I cut.
no, honest.
action too on it. Like everything you do should be actionable. It shouldn't just
Mhm.
be a dashboard for people to never look at again.
As we know through years with marketing ops, rev ops, reporting, all this kind of stuff, oftentimes the most boring basic thing solved well can be the most impactful thing. And so if that's where AI can help, all right, and that's where those ID, like when we say consolidate issues to ID overlap, it truthfully is what are the things that are the problems or issues that we're encountering that have the greatest impact for multiple teams, for multiple reports, for multiple things that you're trying to accomplish. Having it help with those will be the most impactful. It's not going to be this amazing, semi-intelligent model that you were able to build out necessarily. But if you can take away some friction, if you can help address some of these problems or help get insights on an issue, that's going to speak volumes to teams.
So the question is, what do you guys think is worth learning or bolstering nowadays in terms of tech skills, programming languages, system architecture, data mining? And I am going to maybe say something controversial as usual. When I interview somebody for a revenue operations role, I care less about certifications. And that's very different for a non-technical interviewer and for a consulting agency, because those certifications actually serve them and cut down on some costs in some ways, which we can get into in another webinar. What I look for are people who understand basic data structure, tables, how they relate to each other, basic formula logic, and then can take a verbal set of requirements and translate that into workflows like visuals and how things should operate together. Like, I don't really care if they can sit there and solution something off the top of their head. I want them to think through the business context, ask questions, and then be able to visually workflow things. So I look less for programming skills because I know SQL and I've used it so many times. I didn't think I'd continue using it, but with ChatGPT and other AI, it's much easier to supplement that. What I care more about is somebody being able to take business requirements and be able to translate them into logical steps, because that's going to be so helpful in terms of taking business requirements and actually doing something with them. What are you two seeing, and do you disagree?
I don't disagree overall, but I would actually, so I'm learning a lot more programming languages right now, but that is pure interest based. I am super interested in it. I've been building out like a lot of my own API connections, not using like any intermediaries. But that's because I want to. And now I don't have to use I don't have to use a lot of other companies because I can just directly pull that information in how I want to. The reason I'm actually learning more about this is because I've learned I have really spotty information on some of this stuff. I've like taught
Mm,
myself over the years, and I would be faster at troubleshooting where the problems are very quickly if I had a bit of a better grounding for it. So that's what I'm doing, but that's not what everyone's going to do. It's just, I would say, whatever you end up doing, like it's got to be something you're also interested in. I don't know that it's going to be necessary for anyone's role. I don't really think it is, but like I'm getting a lot more technical, but it's because I also want to. I really enjoy it. It's a lot of fun. I no longer when something tells me that like that doesn't hook up to this system, I'm like, oh, yes, it does. And I'm able to do it myself now. So that's really fun for me. But I would say
yeah.
Yeah,
I also realize it. Sorry.
no. We always want to start right after Courtney. No, similar. I do actually believe that with the way AI systems are built today, the truly technically minded people are going to be the most successful with it because they will first know to be able to check the inputs and outputs for accuracy to make sure, right? Prompt engineering is a whole field in and of itself right now because it's burgeoning. There's, handbooks and guides and videos and all these things, but to truly understand what is needed technically, you have to first know the technicalities, right? And I think, yes, over time, the requirement for that technicality is going to decrease. I do also think at some level, I think some that can translate between technical and business speak are always going to be valuable. But I do think those that can dive deeper into both sides are going to be the truly irreplaceable when it comes to this, because when it's one of the issues I've always felt here is you have to be able to explain how the AI got to that result. Because so often, or is there going to be an output for something? We've all seen it with reports, models, things where they go, cool, where did you get that data? What is it saying? What is the actual operation going on? Versus just, line go up. It's really got to be, how are we getting to that? And if you can only say, well, I entered a prompt through a table that I didn't understand it and it did some magic and gave me an output, sorry, here's the door, have a nice severance, you're good. We really do need those people who can sit there and translate, but know to some degree what's going on. That's at least my opinion on
Okay. Sorry, I'm just skipping ahead a little
it.
bit. I think we've talked about this quite a bit, but are there some points you want to touch on before we go into specific examples?
No, I think we kind of covered a good bit
Yeah,
of
we've
that
covered that.
earlier. Okay. So I'm going to talk about a few of these. The other folks on the panel are going to talk about a few of these. We want to get into the actual workflows, but um, so I want to talk about what I'm seeing work in the market. And I had this really amazing, I got to sit in a session in RevOps AF Berlin, and someone actually sat through and showed how they were using Clay as a connector and not the enrichment source. And then we're pulling in a ton of different data sources and AI tools within a table and then serving it back to Salesforce. And what was really cool about it is they had thought beyond just your standard enrichment, first name, last name, industry, blah, blah, blah. They actually were helping a security company scrape the web, pull back news reports on data breaches. And then what they were doing is using ChatGPT to summarize it and serve up the sources to the salespeople, because the thought is AI is never going to be trustworthy 100%, at least not with how it's structured now. But we can give salespeople the tools to look and see whether or not this is super legit, and we should be using this as part of our outreach. And when I'm seeing a lot of some companies are kind of all in one, it's purpose built. You've got AI that's part of the tool. And I'm also seeing people incorporate AI in workflows at certain steps, which is what those all-in-one solutions are doing too. They're not using AI for every logic step, at least from what I've seen. Where I've seen people struggle a little bit is trying to use AI to write the entire workflow, but having it help you write better specific prompts, test it, ask it why it's doing something and how to make it better, and then using that I see work really well. So do you want to dig into either of you? Do you want to dig into any of these specific examples and how you've seen it work?
Yeah, I think like the summarizing seems kind of boring, but it's really not. Like I use it a lot for just have it on the background of like your outreach, sales enablement whenever someone calls someone, it's not actually like giving you a pitch, but it gives you information, a summarization of like previous opportunities or previous times this person's been spoken to. So you don't look like a jerk when you're calling and you have no idea what's going on. You don't know that they went like 200 steps through a deal. I mean, people shouldn't do that, but we know that they do. So like summarization of information that you have in Salesforce, summarization of things that are in the news. And so when you can think of those things and you can be more creative, and I think that's the key here too. There's no like just what do I do? Like you need to know your business and you also need to know like you got to be a little creative in some of these things and finding these use cases that really like can set you apart and really be useful for your teams. And every team's going to be different in how they do things as well. Like I don't use it as much for documentation. I should, because I'm also just garbage at documenting things. But like I use it for Python and SQL all the time. I get very wrong answers, but I then troubleshoot and fix it. So you have to know that everything you're, like you said, like you're going into, I think the ability to troubleshoot is something that's going to be very important to moving
Mhm.
forward.
Critical thinking, my God. Dom?
I think the most impactful of these are the ones where, yes, you're gonna be able to kind of ask it for some piece of information, net new, like you mentioned, help me out with some of these kind of coding exercises, or here, can you help, provide me some information, right? So some of the brainstorming. But the most impactful ones to me are going to be the ones where you're feeding it information and asking it to then reprocess that and reformat. So the first three, in truth, where you're either giving it data to summarize, you're either asking it to document things based on information you've provided, or pointing it to a resource, or that tech stack kind of mapping, having it be able to build out some kind of a workflow based on a spreadsheet, order of operations, those things, is something where I think it could potentially help translate, right? Help that person translate the tech stack, help them understand what's going on, and be able to translate that up into a more accessible format.
Andre was asking for specific. I was specifically talking about, I spend a lot of time in Canva, Figma, Miro, doing visual workflows of how data flows through systems. And then I love doing a tech stack map because it's always a great way to throw that up on the board and have the executives go, oh, this is why it's so hard. But that visual with the labels on it, I've found that AI has gotten much better at reading visuals. So I'll upload the visual and say, give me a spreadsheet of all the systems, and then maybe add some columns on what they do. And it's getting really good at that. And I stole that from somebody else at RevOps AF, and it works really well. I will say, if I could wave a magic wand and make RevOps better at anything, it's when I know I have a really big project, I take a bunch of benchmarks and then I measure, you know, a month after the project, 3 months and 6 months, throwing that into ChatGPT and saying, hey, here are the findings, write me a summary email I can send to the executive team on why this project was worth doing. You're selling your value, your team's value to the business, and it's something that we need to get better at. And this is a really an easier way to do it, at least.
Yeah, I love that idea.
Yeah.
I haven't done that and I definitely need to.
And then put it on your resume, the key findings. That's life changing. I found workflows you should be using now. We covered this. Let's see, lead to account matching. It can be good at helping write the fuzzy logic necessary to match things, but you have to double check and test on a small population before you blow it up
Mhm.
in your org. That's something that's really important to get right. Scoring, I have strong feelings about as a marketer, but I've seen organizations that swear by it. Enrichment across multiple sources. I love involving humans in this and going to marketing and sales and saying, here's what we found, which should be the winner in each category. And we'll use that going forward because we all know enrichment sources are good at some things and not at others. Using all summarization to eliminate the need for salespeople to fill out next steps on their opportunity to progress it has been really good. And then using call recording software to append opportunity contacts to improve attribution
Mhm.
and campaign visibility. This is a huge one for marketers, and it takes a pain in the butt step off the plate of sales. And then, of course, getting creative with lead routing, enrichment, scraping, finding things that are important to the business in order to segment things. Does anyone want to add to this before we get to Courtney's specific example?
I will say I don't think that I would really use it for lead to account matching right now. You might use it as a step within it, but I think that's pretty dangerous. And I don't know how everyone on this call is, but I have to imagine you have some wild rules that exist for like lead routing and lead to account matching. So those
Oh,
wild rules.
I should clarify. It wasn't for the actual rules. It was for helping write the
Yeah.
logic. And
That
then
makes
you
more sense.
test the
Yeah.
logic. It wasn't like
I do know some people
the
are using these for some of this stuff. So I would really hazard people not to do that just yet. I don't think it's just not.
You can't use it for deterministic things yet,
Yeah.
right? If there's some intuitiveness that's kind of involved, then yes, of course. Or if it's like I said, grabbing information, transforming it. But yeah, if you do need that like routing capability to say, yes, based on these criteria, it's the output. Yeah, of course, right? That's still deterministic. You still want that to be an exact path. But if you need to uncover patterns, if you need to find other types of information, or as it gets more advanced, you can step into that kind of what would I assign an intern to do, or what would I assign kind of an entry-level person to do to understand and read through and grab information. Like one of the ways that I've heard people, I haven't built it up myself, but I've heard folks at Openprise talk about is for enrichment, combining it with like a Google search API. So getting a kickback on the number of franchises for a certain company, Google will have that, what it delivers back, using the AI to read through that, grab that piece of information and drop that in. And so it's a way to get enrichment of non-traditional sources of information, but you have to feed it the information first through a deterministic process. It can't be just tell me how all these things, because you want it to be sourced. You want to be able to point back to something. But it definitely opens up for a lot of these a secondary possibility, but I would always start deterministic first and then add the complications on.
One thing I
for lead
actually
to, sorry, there's a question.
Yeah.
But do you want to go first?
No, all I was going to say really quick was that one thing I actually really love about AI now is we've all been using the same call software for years, and they have AI capabilities, or so they say they do. But you're completely beholden to what inputs they put in to get that information out. And I listened to a call and I didn't feel like the summary was actually accurate. Didn't catch like tone, or it didn't catch things I want. So the ability now for me to go back, put these calls through something and pull out information that I care about right now, like was urgency create, whatever it is, it doesn't matter. Like those things, I think that's really awesome that now we can like actually look at all this data, all this information we had before, but we're not waiting on somebody else to decide what a summary should be. I can decide what a summary should be, or I have a lot more control over it at least.
Yeah, and for me, that was the moment where I'm like, oh, this call recording software is no longer a nice to have. We need to have it because of how much we can mine out of it. Before I was like, nobody's going to take the time to get what we need out of this information. So the question was for lead to account matching, how do you suggest dealing with poor data quality? And I feel like that's a softball for both.
I mean, it depends on what you have, but when I look through that, I pick every piece of information I can out. I mean, the first thing, like you're getting an email, like pull the email. I try not to match on company anyways. I always try to match on website or something like that. You should be getting an email. You should be telling, I don't know what your business is. If it's direct to consumer, that's going to be different, but require a business email. If they give you a fake email, it's kind of a fake lead. So that would be my suggestion is like, try to go I mean, paywalls aren't going to work as well as they used to in general, but trying to get that email and get something that you can hard match is going to be better. Data quality, there's a lot more out there now that's a lot less expensive than it used to be. I take a look at trying to enrich things a little bit differently than you used to. This is a good example of something that like I tried this years ago. It was too expensive. I couldn't do it. It's time to like take a look at what's out there again and see if you can't get some better matches or some cheaper data to at least clean some of this up beforehand.
Yeah, for lead to account matching, along with Courtney, I would always recommend relying on things that are more standardized. So company name, right? You have different spellings, different spacing, Inc., LLC, is that information included? Yeah, there's a lot of things that can standardize, but you're still really reliant on what they typed in versus, if they typed in an email and it's got a domain, You can always compare that up to other contacts, compare that up to other accounts in your system. There are ways to kind of work around it. But again, I think the ultimate, as she mentioned there, is finding something that can help you standardize and enrich to where you're kind of leveling the playing field a little bit for the data that's going to be compared. Is going to be probably the most impactful, but it's never going to go away. Like I've seen people try to do a company name match with AI to say, look for these records in this field that seem similar. But again, remember, these tools are built for sounding human, not for full accuracy. There's a lot of interpretation of that's going to go on there. So it's really finding about what information you have, what works best for your use case and your company, and really trying to rely on things that the way I think about it is things they have to type correctly, like an email. Because if there's a typo in an email, you're kind of out of luck a little bit overall. Company name, I've seen typos in those all the times. I've made typos in my own. Email, though, if I want that communication, I'm going to make sure that's typed correctly. So you can always use that information as well.
Yeah, and going off the domain is great advice, in addition to maybe layering in IP country information if you have a really complex enterprise sales, with the knowledge that it's never going to be in a remote world. It's never going to be 100%. They're going to have to use a little bit of research, but maybe scraping LinkedIn could help. I think the one thing I would add to all the great advice here is that not all data is created useful, and to really interrogate your sales and marketing teams as to what is most important for understanding your segments. And then having bake-offs with enrichment companies to figure out which ones are best at those specific things. And then that will help you narrow down what to invest in, instead of investing in a lot of tools for, like, getting mobile phone data is always going to be hard. So prioritizing that's probably not the best idea. Focus on what your company really needs for enrichment. Okay. So Courtney, take it away.
Yeah. So one of the things I guess I do like a ton of data mining is from LinkedIn profiles. So it's not just like, I want to find out about this person. We do things like trying to figure out mirroring and using language that they use. We also have things like Gaggle that everyone says the same thing. So it's kind of difficult. But one of my favorite use cases of LinkedIn is actually just data validation. And I'll go through that like in the next slide. Trying to figure out what a company cares about. If you're looking at their account, at the account level, at the person level, yeah, like see their posts, see what they're doing and stuff. But really, like, figure out, like, is this the previous company? Can you match that to someone in Salesforce that you already have? Can you pull that mobile phone number that you already have that worked and move it over? Using like the LinkedIn URL really should be everybody's new kind of domain or email, because now you're able to match people from record 1 to 2 to 5 to whatever. And it's become like my favorite thing. So one of the things I try to make sure I do is that, no offense, data providers, you guys give so many bad LinkedIn URLs for the wrong person I don't know why that happens. So, and it's like not even close. So I'm validating to make sure that I have the right LinkedIn URL for somebody, then I can find it if not. But if like the names don't match or the companies are completely off, I flag it. I have an idea that this is something that's probably incorrect. ICP, Fit News, like, yeah, pulling every piece of information you can, like, take it, use it, summarize it, hand it to your teams if it's useful, figure out what actually matters to them, let them tell you that if it's stuff that they're actually going to use. And one thing that I will say, when you're pulling stuff, there's stuff that I'm like, wow, you should really be talking about this. Make sure your SDRs or whoever it is going out into the field are comfortable talking about, understand what they are very comfortable talking about, or where they might need some training. And if it's not training, or, what they're comfortable going through, and prioritize some things along those lines so that they're actually going to be able to take action on all of the data you're pulling. Because I certainly can feel sometimes like I'm just pulling everything, and I have to take a step back and make sure I'm making it usable and not just being, I don't know, like data greedy and just taking all of the data I can for current or later use. And I mean, that really goes to the why to sales for like lead qualification. Like, you need to understand from them what their point of view is. And you're going to have to explain to them as well, like, if something comes in from a new source, like what these people are looking at, what this kind of means. And I will say, I think a lot of sales teams have really adopted like the use of like chat GPT and things like that, but it's always on a one-off scale. They don't seem to be able to comprehend like doing this at scale or pulling tons of information at once for a number of different customers versus like chatgpt.com, let me like input this, like, and then go from there. So that's something I'd be really careful about with your teams, is keeping that communication open whenever you are doing anything with AI, especially because we test, but you need to continue to test and you need them, teach them what to look out for and when to, like our SDR team, when something is like going off the rails, they tell me. When formatting starts to get weird with something that doesn't look right, they tell me so that I can go back and get those things fixed. So we know that we need to make some changes the next time. And then, yeah, so ABM list building from like a neutral party, I actually would kind of call this one scoring. So all of that data we're talking about, the news stories, all of these things, putting those into a score. I wouldn't use AI to score necessarily, but I use AI to scrape. And then I incorporate that information into a score if it's something that's relevant to you. Like they've acquired a company and you think that they're a really good fit because of X, Y, or Z. It's going to depend on what you're doing. You know, pull that information in and maybe they get a really big bump because you're able to use like all this news, all this stuff. It can be really hard to give that to somebody and tell them like to run with it. One thing you can absolutely do is like incorporate it into your existing systems so they're less like, so they understand what's going on a little bit better. Like, hey, this had a huge jump because of X, Y, or Z, and they know that they have a high score. I should go after them. So even if they don't understand some of that other stuff, they're going to understand that. All right.
Was this
Yeah, there's a lot here. So you may as well just go through all of it. Yeah, just click a ton. This was built, I apologize. This was something I repurposed all of your hard work that I did recently. So I did put up just one quick workflow for people. And this is something that is like a collaboration between a number of departments. Ops is the two middle ones. We have marketing and we have sales. So when I'm talking about like the account research, we let our teams actually like mark them themselves in some case. So I'm showcasing how they're like finding their target lists and stuff like that and communicating that to us. We do a good bit of this on our own without them marking it, but it gives them that opportunity to say like, I need new information on this account. And so we have create a trigger if we haven't prioritized something already. And then we run a flow in whatever AI system that we're using, and that's going to scrape information on the person and on the account, and typically industry, anything we can get. Like I'll look through job postings to see if there's money, if they're actually investing in people. If they're not, like get it, all these things, and they will feed back into part of our scoring mechanisms. We also check for anomalies and flag. I already mentioned the LinkedIn names not matching. Things like, oh man, I was able to mark so many of our accounts that were acquired. Things like that. Like if I'm scraping your website and your name isn't anywhere in your website, there's something wrong. We need to take a look at that. Or if it didn't load for some reason and it no longer exists, like how many companies do you have in your system that are completely gone? That one was huge, and actually like it was a lot. It was like, oh wow, there's so many that have been acquired. And then, you know, we made a new process for absorbing all of those. And we do still use like a human to look through when there's something very strange, but we're starting to build out as we see what happens with this like very standardized process that's checked time and time again. We are seeing that like, okay, when this happens, it's usually this. We're going to be wrong once in a while, but this is like low stakes and time consuming. So if we're wrong right now, you know, you have 2,000 things that are wrong. If I implement this, maybe 4 of them are wrong or something like that. Like that's a number I don't care about. Like that's fine if our error rate is something like that. So from there, we typically will run multi-vendor enrichment and update the data if something doesn't look right or we don't have what we need. And, you know, we're always marking triggers for the next step. So you can see there's a little bit of a break here because what you do next is going to be, it could be a million different things. Our sales team is going to be utilizing that data where it's relevant. I mentioned like putting some of this information in the call scripts when they're calling people so they know what's going on with that, putting that into a score as well. Our team is typically kind of creating plumbing. We're building new processes from what we've learned, and we are also creating new insights, maybe making changes to whatever scoring we have to give more insight. And then marketing is able to actually resegment and see what people are maybe interested in. So if you have like 50 nurture tracks, I don't, that's way too many, but let's say you have too many nurture tracks, you're able to kind of figure out maybe what someone's a little bit more interested in based on their industry, their account, the contact. And if you can't find information on a company or on a person, fall back to the company. You can't find information on a company, but you still want to reach out and try to put them in something that they're maybe interested in. Put them in a nurture track that's maybe going to be more relevant to their industry. And AI is going to be a lot better at looking through some of that stuff than you will, because we're not going to take the time to do it.
So we have a couple questions that are fantastic. One is, are you mostly using ChatGPT, or what are you using throughout? Is it one tool or multiple?
Multiple. So I use our own LLM. I have actually started, I've used Copy AI for a while too. That was like one of the first companies. They're good at doing things like at scale, but you still have to like really iterate and make sure that it makes sense to use. And that's going to be something more similar to like a Clay as well. And then I have actually started to build out my own integrations directly to with the OpenAI API. So I'm doing things that way as well. So I'm seeing
Mhm.
where I get the results I want pretty much.
From my standpoint, we rely really heavily at the RevOps Co-op on a Zapier connection to Clay. Because we're smaller, we don't tend to run into the cost prohibitive limits. So if you have a small data set, it can be cost effective. Also OpenAI, Perplexity I've dabbled with, and there's a ton of other tools I use from like a copywriting, documentation, email writing perspective, but not as relevant. Dom, have you tinkered with any others?
Yeah, I've played around with kind of the major players in truth. Out of our platform specifically, yeah, I've used the LLM that we have embedded in our system. We do have like native connections out to most of the major AI systems as well. So if customers have that, we can connect up to that and they can use it within their workflows and get those returns. But for my personal usage, it's mainly been, like you said, kind of writing, kind of more thoughts, collection information from one of the kind of chat-based ones, as well as our internal LLM for the platform.
And another question, do we have any guidelines in terms of volume of data an LLM can handle efficiency, like the LinkedIn URL scraping example? I have some thoughts, but I'll kick it over to you both first.
Honestly, you're usually going to be limited by the platform you're in. You might have 32,000 characters. Um, I personally would want to cut some of that up. The main difference might be something like a call transcript. That would probably be the largest thing I would ever want to put in. Everything else, I'm less interested in putting that much information in, especially if there are a ton of different data points. It's going to miss them. You need it really specialized. And honestly, if you're even when I'm doing call transcripts, I have different jobs asking for different things. One big mistake I notice is, okay, I want to know a summary of this, and I want this thing, and I want this information, I want this, and I want this and this. That's going to actually, you're going to get the worst outputs that way. You need to be very clear and concise in what you want extracted from that data. And if you do that in separate steps, it can be cost prohibitive. It can be more expensive to do it that way, but you're going to get much better results that are a lot more accurate in my experience, at least.
And there's some things to think through that I think sometimes people miss is like, how quickly do you need this data refreshed? Is this a speed to lead situation? Or is this something where we can group these into segments? Also, think through really hard what all you actually want to process and what you can leave out, because it's really important to think, do you need to run an active context in companies through this? No. Like, depending on how you build this and structure it, you can hit API limits, which can be really detrimental to your entire organization and how they do their job. So really think through initially, what's the smallest population I can test with, and how is and watch how that impacts your system and kind of go from there would be my
Yeah.
advice. Dom, do you want to add anything?
No, in truth, I'm always a proponent of getting things down to the smallest meaningful step, action, or unit that you can, versus expecting a long-winded prompt or data set to then give you a series of results. Starting small, keeping it efficient. Like you said, you may have more calls over time, but the data you're gonna be able to see from A to B to C, and you'll be able to understand what it did, and be able to troubleshoot should things go awry.
I think also when you're looking at like that, think of it like enrichment. Like you're gonna do some pieces more frequently than others. Some things you don't actually run until you have some indication that something is off. Like think of it that way. Like doing this annually. Like, do you really need to scrape somebody's website like every year? No, you really, really don't. Like you can do it probably every few years, unless you have some indication that like they're defunct, that something's no longer there. Just like I got a bunch of hard bounces for somebody. I think they might have left the company. So you guys have done this for, most of you have probably done this a long time. Just use your common sense like you do any other time. And I'm super cheap, so I understand that worry for
Same.
sure.
I knew we were friends. So I blew past that last slide. I promise we did cover the content throughout. Thank you for all of the questions. We are out of time. Dom and Courtney, thank you so much for sharing all of your knowledge.
Thank you.
This was amazing. Thank you. And have a great day, everyone.
Thanks.
Thank you. Bye-bye.